friends! Today we're going to talk about combining the distributive property and combining like terms, which we've talked about individually previously. So generally when we're talking about both of those things or those two concepts combined, we just say that we're simplifying expressions. Okay, because to simplify means to make simpler, which is what we do with expressions, which are combinations of terms that we add and subtract. Okay, so anything with variables and coefficients and constants that we're adding and subtracting, those are expressions. Okay, so we have two steps that we have to follow in order to make that happen. The first thing that we need to do is we always use the distributive property first. Distributive property. So that always comes first. And you can remember that by thinking about order of operations. Okay, so when we think of order of operations, we do multiplication and division before we do addition and subtraction. And distributive property is multiplying, so we have to do that multiplying first before we combine like terms with our adding and subtracting. Okay, and then after we use the distributive property, we are going to combine all of our like terms. Okay, so let's look at an example. So what are we going to do first? Well, the first thing we're going to do is the distributive property, which we have right here. So we're going to take this -3 and we're going to multiply it by everything inside. So -3 times 2 is a -6x, and then -3, well, the negative turns this addition into a minus or a subtraction. So that turns into a minus since we're multiplying by a negative. -3 times 4 is 12. Okay, so remember that anytime you multiply by a negative, it's going to flip the sign of everything. So this became negative and this became a minus. Okay, everything gets flopped when you multiply by a negative. And then we'll just throw in the +2 minus 7x at the end because we haven't gotten there. So that's step 1. And then 2, we're going to combine like terms. So we'll start off, we have a -6x right here, and then minus a 7x right there. So -6 minus 7 is -13x. And then I have a -12 and a +2. So -12 plus 2, or -12 plus 2, gives you a -10. And that is our final answer. We can't combine anything else because our x's and our constants are not like terms. So we just keep it like that. Okay. Look at our next example. So once again, we'll start with distributive property because multiplication comes first. And we need to be super, super careful because you see this minus right here? When it comes to distributive property, we have to think of it as a negative. Minuses and negatives are more or less the same thing, okay? So we're going to think of this as a -8. And we're going to multiply times both. And remember, since we're multiplying by a negative, that flips the sign of both. So this becomes a -3. This becomes a -7. Okay, so we'll start with number 1 as our distributive property. So we're going to have 8 times 3, and we already knew that was a negative, so negative 24x minus 8 times 7 is 56. Yeah. And then we have our 8x out here. So now we have 8x minus 24x minus 56, and then our plus 2. So don't forget these extra pieces after you distribute. If you forget them, then you're not going to have your total answer. Okay? And then for our second piece, we're going to combine like terms. And in this case, they're very nicely set up for us. So we've got 8x minus 24x. That's going to give us a negative 16x. And then we've also got these right here. Negative 56 plus 2 is going to give us minus 54. Okay, so remember that a negative and a minus are the same thing. So here I thought of it as a negative so I could do my addition, but I wrote it right here as a minus because they're really just the same thing. So we can kind of think of them flipping back and forth. And that's our final answer because I cannot combine x's and constants. Okay, so remember, number 1, we distribute first, making sure we're keeping track of our negatives. We're not losing them, and we're multiplying every term by the negative. And then second, we're going to combine our like terms. So our x's go together, our constants go together. If we have y's, those go together too, and so on.